Hello everybody, I'm back with another video for you already. This one was just kind of pressed on me in a couple of days as far as doing a video of it. It's something that I pondered for, oh gosh, I know at least a year. It's called The Sure Peg, and it's going to cover Isaiah 21 and 22. Jeremiah 16:19. O Yahuwah, my strength, my stronghold and my refuge, in the day of distress of nations, shall come to you from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited only falsehood, fertility, and there's no value in them. We find that a lot of the truths that we've been taught all our lives by our fathers and by pastors and stuff are not what is in actuality in the scriptures. So we have to rethink, pull out of the gravel, and walk forward with what we know is the truth. Hidden truths in Scripture. Yeshua told us, then he said to them, these are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. So anything you read in the Old Testament that's future prophecy, it has to come true for that New Testament to be accurate. By the time we get to the end of this video, you will definitely know what time the seasons of Yahuwah we're in. Because in this video, I'm going to part some waters and I'm going to reveal some truth. So just bear with it and watch it to the end. Don't get frustrated and say, oh, she's all wrong. Wait till you hear it all out. What should you do right now? Pray for your heart, your ears to be open, and your eyes to see. Because Isaiah tells us in 6:10, make the heart of the people fat, and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and shall turn and be healed. Then I said, Yahuwah, until when? And he answered, until the cities are laid waste without inhabitant, and the houses are without man, and the land is laid waste a ruin. And Yahuwah has removed men far away, and the forsaken places be many in the midst of the land. So he was telling him, I'm closing up, I'm sealing it up till the very end. So it's time right now to pray for wisdom, and that your ears be unplugged and your eyes be open to everything that you read. You know, when I first became a believer, every night I get on my knees and I pray. And my one prayer, the big one, I didn't pray for a lot of other things, but I prayed for that. I prayed for wisdom to understand His Word, because it is very confusing and there's so much to it, and no matter how long you study it, there's things that you just don't see. I mean, I didn't see, I pondered these couple of chapters really hard. I even asked a couple of friends, what is this? This is Messiah, is it? And then when I found out about Paul, I was like, oh my gosh, please don't tell me the whole New Testament is not real, and this was Yeshua that was the sure peg put into place to deceive everybody. And I thought, well, that doesn't make sense, because there's other prophecies that fit. So I was really struggling when I first found these couple of chapters, and I came by them. I'm going to be honest with y'all about how I ended up studying Isaiah so hard. I don't hardly ever dream. If I do, I'm sure I do dream, but I just don't remember my dreams. It's like I haven't for a long time. And I started dreaming, and in my dreams, I would wake up in the morning, I was holding the scriptures, and I was looking, and when I would see it could even see the book I was reading, and most of the time it was Isaiah, and I said, well, he's trying to tell me something, and I couldn't remember what chapter I was on or anything, because my dreams go away real fast. So what I did, I put a little notebook by my bed, and immediately I'd write down Well, first I saw, from what I was being shown, that the law was still in effect, the Torah and the law of Yahuwah. And I thought, oh, that's good. He showed me something that I need to really change some things in my life now, because I see I'm supposed to be keeping Sabbaths. I'm supposed to be doing the diet and all. So I started making all these major changes in my life. Well, I thought, well, he's told me what I needed to know. Well, I was wrong. The dreams continued. And I kept writing them down. Then I saw about Paul. And that was real upsetting, because I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Does this mean that the whole New Testament is a false? I went through this just flood of emotions. I went through the emotions of, oh, were my grandparents saved? They read Paul at my grandfather's funeral. I was just really, really beside myself. I cried for days, and I just kept on plugging. I'm like, I trust you, Father. I trust you. I'm gonna continue to read and continue to figure this out. And then I started to see it. I started to see it all in the Old Testament. I'm like, oh my gosh, what has happened to us? We have been massively deceived. Yeshua was real, but all kinds of things snowballed and happened that we don't even see, because basically, if you go even to a non-denominational church as a Protestant, or you go to a Catholic church, you're going to hear a lot of Paul's scriptures. You're going to hear a lot of the New Testament scriptures and the new gospel and the new news, but none of the old news. And the Old Testament and the New Testament are one big book. It's not two separate books. And I believe, and this is just with my heart, and this is my opinion, but I believe that the two witnesses are the Old Testament and the New Testament. So, because when you put them together, you can see the whole picture. Until you do that, you will never see it. You can stay in your New Testament and you're not going to see this stuff. So I kept on plugging and plugging, and through a lot of study and a lot of time, I have come to understand these two chapters, I think. And I'm going to share with y'all what I have found out of these two chapters. I recently had like a revelation on a couple of verses here, and I was going to share that with you. Luke tells us about the scroll when Yahushua opens the Isaiah scroll. I'm going to read this to you. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. And he goes on down and he says, and he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. Well, my revelation about this chapter is that Yahushua actually literally activated that scroll. I have another video I'm going to do on that. I'm almost complete with it, but I wanted to add that here since this is about that scroll. There's no accidents in Yahuwah's world. And when they discovered that cave at about the same time that Israel became a nation, and the one thing that came out of that cave in Qumran at the Dead Sea Scrolls that was intact was the Isaiah scroll. And I think that's significant and important. And I don't know why it hit me when I was reading it in Luke recently, but it did. He activated that whole book. So it's very important I would read all of Isaiah and study it out really hard. But I just wanted to add that here before we start talking about the sure peg. In Matthew 16:17, this is what Yeshua says. And And I should pronounce it a little better because I found out that Yeshua is not really correct. It should be Yahusha is how it should be pronounced. So, and Yahusha answering said to him, Blessed are you, Peter, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I also say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I shall build my assembly, and the gates of hell shall not overcome it. And this is where we get the prophecy of Peter being handed the keys. And the Catholic Church uses this as their thing of why they're the true church, because Peter was handed those keys. We're going to see what Yahushua was doing was he was sending us back to the Old Testament to see something. But because I didn't know the Old Testament well enough, I didn't know that. To see Isaiah 22 in historical context is important for our first question to be, was Peter really in Rome? Most of your modern Christians want to say that Peter never went to Rome, but there's way too much evidence when you start really researching. That was one of the things I did when I started suspecting that this chapter tied with what Yahushua had said, is to go back and look at, well, was Peter really even in Rome? The first place to look is what Peter said. Now, Peter gives us a clue. It's like 1 Peter 5:13. She who is at Babylon, who is likewise chosen, sends you greetings, and so does Mark, my son. So Babylon was like a code name and usually referred to Rome. And she is usually a reference to the assembly as far as the early church history goes. Scripturally, we have Hebrews attesting to the fact they were in Rome. Hebrews 13:24, greet all your leaders and all the saints. Those who come from Italy send you greetings. So he's telling you leaders are in Italy. So we know we have two New Testament witnesses that yes, they were in Rome. A significant number of scholars, including a skeptic, Bart Ehrman, believes that 1 Clement 5:1-4 provides early attestation for the martyrdoms of both Peter and Paul. Standard dating for this letter is toward the end of the 1st century, around 95 to 96 AD, and some scholars believe it was written even earlier. It's the only non-canonical document attesting the deaths of Peter and Paul within the 1st century, and is written within one generation of the deaths of the apostles. So Bockamil has noted the references in quite recent time and of our own generation refer to the living memory. Clement assumes his audience is fully aware of their martyrdom accounts and attempts them to being true. And Polycarp also seems to know 1 Clement 5:4 as meaning that Peter died as a martyr. Gellius, who was a Roman presbyter in the early 3rd century, claims that Peter and Paul founded the Rome Church. Toward the end of the 2nd century, Irenaeus also says that Peter and Paul preached at Rome and laid the foundation for the church. Finally, the Acts of Peter explicitly mentioned that Peter went to Rome to challenge Simon Magus. In some early Christian tradition, unanimously mentions Peter in Rome toward the end of his life. While the specific date is conjectural, it is historically accurate that Peter was in Rome at some point. Also, if you read the Acts of Nazarene, it's like he talks about going too. So Pope Clement of Rome is listed by Irenaeus and Tertullian as Tertullian considered Clement to be the imminent successor of Peter. Clement records Peter's death in his first epistle. So we have the imminent successor of Peter recording about Peter. And also we have the Acts of the Nazarene, which tell us that Clement was dictating and writing for Peter and was studying under him the whole time. But this is what Clement says in his first epistle, 5:3-4. Let us place before our eyes the good apostles. Peter, though unjust envy, endured not one or two, but many labors, and at last, having delivered his testimony, departed into the place of glory due to him. So that's Clement, who was studying under Peter, recording about Peter. From the first century, an apocryphal work called The Ascension of Isaiah has come down to us, and this is probably the first and earliest document that attests to the martyrdom of Peter in Rome. In the passage we read the following prediction. Then will rise Belshazzar, the great prince, the king of the world, who has ruled it since its origin, and he shall descend from the firmament in human form, king of wickedness, murderer of his mother, who himself is the king of this world, and he will persecute the plant, which the 12 apostles of the beloved shall be planted. One of the 12 will be delivered into his hands. So Belshazzar is like the Antichrist, or the anti-Messiah. The Epistle of Clement to James, although many historians have placed this letter in the last 10 years of the first century, there are some objections to this. The largest objection, of course, is that James could not have possibly been alive at that late of date. All indications are that James was killed during the interfactional warfare that occurred in Jerusalem prior to the Roman destruction of the city in 70 AD. There is an abundance of material to show that Peter ordained Clement to replace Linus as an overseer for the Roman Church after the latter martyrdom in 67 AD. The list of bishops of Rome in the Ante-Nicene Fathers shows that Clement was an overseer from 68 to 71 AD. Evidently, his first item of business as an overseer was to inform James of Peter's death. And this is what he said. Clement to James, who rules or oversees Jerusalem, the holy church of the Hebrews, and the churches everywhere, exceedingly founded by the providence of God, and the elders and deacons, and the rest of the brethren, peace always. He himself, Peter, by reason of immense love toward men, having come as far as Rome, clearly and publicly testifying, in opposition to the wicked one who withstood him, that there is to be a good king over all the world, while saving men by his God-inspired doctrine. Himself, by violence, exchanged his present existence for life. And that's from Clement to James, and that was translated in 1926 in New York, the Antecedent Fathers, and it was translated by Alexander Roberts and James Donaldson. A cryptic reference to Peter occurs in the book of John in the Scriptures, which most authorities believe was written in the last decade of the first century. Here, in verses 18 and 19 of chapter 21, we read, I tell you the truth, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Even ancient Ethiopic texts, translated by the late Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Bulge, mention Peter's connection with Rome. And it came to pass, when the apostle divided the countries of the world among them, the city of Rome became the portion of Peter. Now when the blessed Peter died in the city of Rome, in the days of Nero, the emperor, the apostles were scattered abroad. And this is from the Contendings of the Apostles, translated in London, 1901. An ancient Syriac, eastern part of the Roman Empire document called the Teachings of Simon Magus in the City of Rome asserts the following. And when there was a great rejoicing at Peter's teaching, he built churches there, in Rome and in the cities around about, and in all the villages of all the people of Italy. And after these years, Nero Caesar seized him and shut him up in prison. And he knew that he would crucify him, so he called Ananus the deacon, and made him bishop overseer instead in Rome, and the Antecedent Fathers, translated by Robert Donaldson, and that was in 1926. Another Syriac document, which is an extract from the book concerning Abgar, the king, and the apostle Thaddeus, outlines the areas of responsibility given to each apostle. To Simon Peter was allotted Rome, and to John Ephesus, to Thomas, India, to Adactus, the country of the Assyrians, and they were sent, each one of them, to the district which had been allotted to them. They devoted themselves to bringing several countries to discipleship. And that's from the Antecedent Fathers, page 656. And finally, the same part of the world, another ancient document entitled The Teachings of the Apostles says, and Nero Caesar dispatched the sword, Simon Cleopas, in the city of Rome. What I've quoted here is just a small sampling of the voluminous amount of material that clearly shows that Peter was in Rome. Between what we have in the scriptures and this, it's like there's no denying he was there. Okay, now we go back to Yahushua's words for the tie-in to the New Testament. Matthew 16:17. And Yahushua answered and said to him, Blessed are you, Peter, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in the heavens. And I will say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my assembly, and the gates of hell shall not overcome it. We go further this time, and let's look at the next verse. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Well, our King James Version reads in Isaiah, and the key of the house of David I will lay upon his shoulder, and he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open. And I think one reason we don't see this is in the Septuagint, which Yahushua would have been reading from, it was that I will give the glory of David, and he shall rule, and there shall be none to speak against him. And I will give him the key of the house of David upon his shoulder, and he shall open, and there shall be none to shut, and he shall shut, and there shall be none to open. So it actually, it's like, I think it gives you a little bit more in the Septuagint, but I think the problem is we don't tie this to Isaiah. We're always looking at the New Testament and not really looking at what the Old Testament has to say about these matters. But when you see it, you clearly see the tie-in of the prophecies. Isaiah 21, the Valley of the Vision. Okay, we're going to start our journey of understanding this message in Isaiah 21, the message concerning the wilderness of the sea. Well, sea in the scriptures is usually people. As whirlwinds in the south sweep on, so it comes from the wilderness, from an awesome land. A distressing vision is revealed to me. The treacherous betrays, the ravager ravages. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. All the groaning I bring to an end. Therefore my loins are filled with anguish. Pains have seized me, like the pains of a woman in labor. And we see this in Scripture several times. I was distressed when I heard it, and I was troubled when I saw it. My heart reeled. Horror overwhelmed me. The night for which I longed, he turned into fear for me. Prepare the table, spread the mat, eat and drink. Arise, you princes, anoint the shield. For Yahuwah has said to me, Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he sees. So I guess I'm playing the role of a watchman for Yahuwah right now because I see this, so I guess I have to show it. It's complicated, but I hope I can help you see it. Okay, what I'm going to be showing you with all this is that all this was just the start. It goes on for many generations. It's no quick, just 7-year thing. Matthew 24, and all these are the beginning of birth pains, and they shall deliver you up to affliction and kill you, and you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many shall stumble, and they shall deliver you up one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise up and lead many astray. And because of the increase of lawlessness, the love of many shall become cold. But he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. Matthew 16:23. But he turned and said to Kepha, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for your thoughts are not those of Elohim, but those of men. This is an important statement because of the stumbling block and the falseness and the lawlessness. But we'll see what happens here as we get through Isaiah. To see what I'm about to show you, you have to drop your dispensation beliefs and your preconceived ideas on the end times, or you'll never see it. First, I'm going to look at Revelation 20, 1-3. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. He held hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him in the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more, until the 1,000 years were finished. But after these, he must be released for a little while. There is a big reason there's a first and second resurrection. It's to explain things so that they make sense with the Old Testament. The 1,000 years that everybody has thought are literal, 1,000 years, are not. Rather, they're the whole time between the two advents of Messiah's coming. There's a period of time at the end of the 1,000 years when Satan will again deceive everybody, and that era has already begun. The signs of our world today seem to signal that we are now in the short season, when Satan has been let loose to deceive the nations again. Once you see all this, you're going to know why Jeremiah in 36 says, Ask now and see if a man is given birth. Why do I see every man on his hands on his loins like a woman in labor, and all the faces turned pale? When you see this, your face will turn pale too, and you're going to be a little bit upset. Okay, keep all that I just told you in the back of your hat while you're listening to this. I need to do a video on that 1,000 years so that you can understand what I'm saying on that. I probably will do another video for that. Isaiah 21:7. And he saw a chariot with a pair of horsemen, a chariot of donkeys and a chariot of camels, and he listened attentively, very attentively. So he sees a pair of people, and they've got on donkeys and chariots and camels. And as it go on, you'll see that these two people are probably Peter and Paul. I'm going to do a little jumping back and forth here because of things I want you to correlate with what we're reading. First, we're going to look at Revelation 18:1. And after this, I saw another messenger coming from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was lightened with his esteem. He cried with a mighty voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, and a haunt for every unclean and hated bird. Because all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her whoring, the sovereigns of the earth have committed whoring with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the power of her riotous living. Now we jump back to Isaiah 21, and he said, Then he cried, a lion, O Yahuwah, I stand continually on the watchtower in the daytime, and I sat at my post every night. And see this? A chariot of men coming with a pair of horsemen. And he spoke up and said, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. So here we're correlating the end times with what Isaiah is saying. And Isaiah continues, and he said, And all the carved images of her mighty ones he has broken to the ground. He's talking about the mighty ones are the apostles, the mighty ones of Yahushua. And Revelation 18:4, when we continue on in Revelation, said, I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. So what is happening here is the mighty ones that went off to Babylon, to Rome, and started the Vatican, are the ones that we're supposed to be escaping from. But this goes even deeper than that. And there's so much to tell y'all that I've seen, but it's like it goes deeper than that, because from there sprang out the Protestants and the Orthodox and all the other ones. It's like they created another Yahushua and promoted something that was totally different than what Yahushua was teaching, and that's why he was so upset. And he was breaking them down to the ground at this point. And if you'll notice, immediately after all this happens is when they all start getting martyred and killed. I don't think that it was so much a martyrdom as it was Yahuwah just saying, okay, I've had enough. And he just went at them. The message concerning Arabia. In the forest of Arabia you stay, O you traveling companies of Dedan, you who dwell in the land of Tema. And Tema actually means desert. Bring water to him who is thirsty. Meet the fugitive with bread. For they flee from the swords, from the dawn sword and the bent bow, and from the stress of battle. For thus Yahuwah has said to me, within a year, according to the year of the hired man, all the esteem of Kedar shall come to an end, and the rest of the number of the archers and the mighty men of the people of Kedar shall be few. For Yahuwah of Israel has spoken. What did Paul tell you in Galatians 1:17? Neither went I to Jerusalem to the apostles who were before me, but I went to Arabia, and again returned to Damascus. So he didn't really even go consult the regular apostles. And that's what this is talking about. Isaiah 22. I did 21 because you can't see 22 without 21. You got to see the whole picture of what happened. This is still the Valley of the Vision. Isaiah 22, 1 through 5. The oracle concerning the Valley of the Vision. What do you mean, you've all of you gone up to the housetops? You who are full of shouting, Temoria city, exultant town. And we see in Acts that Peter had his major vision on the housetop. The next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up to the housetop along about 6 hours to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat, but while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance and saw heavens open and something like a great sheet descending being let down by its four corners of the earth. So he was seeing some kind of vision, and he was up on the housetop. So the fact that they both mentioned the housetops helped me tie these two together. Your slain are not slain with sword, or dead in battle. All your leaders have fled together. Without a bow they were captured. All of you were captured, though they had fled far away. Therefore I say, look away from me, and let me wipe bitter tears. Do not labor to comfort me concerning the destruction of the daughter of my people. So they basically abandoned the daughter of the people. And what did they follow? They followed Paul and his message to, like in Acts 17, Luke tells us, for as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with an inscription to an unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him I declare to you. So Luke is telling us that Paul was not even declaring Yahuwah. He was just declaring an unknown God to everybody. For in the day of trouble, and the treading down and the perplexity, Yahuwah Elohim of hosts in the valley of vision, breaking down the walls and crying to the mountains, and Elam bare the quiver with the chariots of the men and horsemen, and Ker uncovered the shield. And it shall come to pass that the choicest valley shall be full of chariots, and the horsemen shall set themselves at the array of the gate. So this is Jerusalem. Shortly after Yeshua has ascended, it's like, here comes the Romans to destroy Jerusalem. Then he removed the covering of Yehuda. The temple was for atonement. That's our covering. And you looked in that day the weapons of the house of the forest. Forest usually, or trees in forest mean groups of people. And you saw the breaches of the city of David, and that it was great. And you gathered together the waters of the lower pool, and you counted the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses that you broke to strengthen the wall. And you dug a ditch between the two walls of the water of the old pool. But you have not looked to the Maker. You have not seen him who fashioned it long ago. So what they did, they pulled away from Jerusalem and took off. And it's like Jerusalem was beginning to be under attack by Rome. And the temple was destroyed, which that was Yahuwah removing their covering, because that was their atonement with the sacrifices. And in that day Master Yahuwah of hosts called for weeping and mourning and baldness and grinding in sackcloth. That's not what happened. They should have been mourning and crying and being upset, but instead they were off doing whatever. Then Isaiah continues on in verse 13. Then see, joy and gladness, killing oxen and slaying sheep, eating meat and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And it was revealed in my hearing of Yahuwah of hosts, for this crookedness shall certainly not be pardoned until you die, said Master Yahuwah of hosts. So what Isaiah is doing is he's telling us what Paul's going to say in the future. In 1 Corinthians 15:32, Paul even records this. It's, if as men do, I have fought with the beast of Ephesus, of what good is it to me? If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. So Isaiah quoted the exact words. This is also echoed further in Isaiah in 56:12, where Isaiah says, come, let me bring wine and fill ourselves with strong drink, and tomorrow shall be as today, even much greater. So Isaiah is basically telling on him why this is a time period when Rome started moving into Jerusalem. So while all that was happening, they were still carrying on like this. I think that's why Yahuwah said about them not wearing sackcloth and not grieving and all. They were still going strong like nothing was happening. Then Isaiah continues on in Isaiah 22:15. Thus says Master Yahuwah of hosts, Go, come to this steward, to Shean, who is over the house, and say, What have you here, and whom have you here, that you have hewn a burial site here, as he who hews himself a burial site on high, inscribing a resting place for himself in a rock? This is indicative of like the big cathedrals with the names on them and everything, because he's talking about a burial site on high, something that mirrors his temple. And I'm going to get into that here in a second and explain that more. And then in Daniel 2:45 we see, But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he let Nebuchadnezzar know what will happen in the last days. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. And the rock, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on the threshing floor in summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. So this rock that everybody has always called Yahusha is not. It was Peter. There's two rocks. And Peter, the whole foundation was built around his name. And it destroys everybody. It destroys the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold pieces. And the mountain is the church. Jeremiah 51:25. Behold, I am against you, O destroying mountain, declares Yahuwah, which destroys the whole earth. I will stretch out my hand against you and roll you down from the crags and make you a burnt mountain. So what is he saying here? O destroying mountain, which destroys the whole earth. It's the rock that was cut out, but not by human hands. It was the sure peg. What people don't realize in the Old Testament is there's two rocks. There's not one. In Deuteronomy 32:4 we see the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice, an Elohim of faithfulness and without inequity. Just and upright is he. They have dealt corruptly with him. They are no longer his children, because they have blemished. They are a crooked and twisted generation. And we know that Yeshua quoted that you're crooked in generation, therefore no sign will be given to you except the sign of Jonah, which is the belly of the whale. And that belly of the whale, he says, is Sheol, which is actually in ancient Hebrew, Saul. I know this is a lot to take in. Deuteronomy 32:31. For their rock is not as our rock. Our enemies are by themselves. And Matthew, he's given a, this is part of the hidden meaning of the parable on the rocky ground. Matthew 13:20. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution arise on account of the word, immediately he falls away. This is that faulty rock, that sure peg that was built. Deuteronomy 32:15. Here's the whole thing in one group. Then Jeshurun became fat and rebelled. You became fat, bloated, and gorged. He abandoned the Elohim who made him and scorned the rock of his salvation. They provoked his jealousy with foreign gods. They enraged him with detestable practices. They sacrificed to demons, not Elohim, to Elohim they had not known. New Elohim that had just arrived, which your fathers did not fear. You ignored the rock who gave you birth, and you forgot the Elohim who gave you birth. When Yahuwah saw this, he despised them. Provoked to anger by his sons and daughters, he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what will become of them. For they are a perverse generation, unfaithful children. They have provoked my jealousy. With their so-called Elohim, they have enraged me with their worthless idols. So I provoked their jealousy with an inferior people. I will enrage them with a foolish nation. For fire has been kindled because of my anger, and burns to the depths of Saul. It devours the land it produced, and scorches the foundation of the mountains. And we see in Acts 17:23 that Paul was out proclaiming an unknown God. It's what Luke tells us is, for as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with an inscription to an unknown God, whom now therefore ye ignorantly worship. Him I declare to you. Now, what is Paul doing with an altar, with an idol altar thing, proclaiming an unknown God? Why is Luke telling us this? Luke is giving us answers to what happened way back then, because we were not there. We have been fed the same things over and over and over till we don't even see the scriptures anymore. Right now, it's like Isaiah said, we need to pray that our eyes be open and our ears be open. There's a lot more there than what we are seeing. A lot more. This is something I wanted to mention right here just because of the content. I have another video that'll be coming out right after this one, and it's about Ezekiel's temple. And I'm going to prove to y'all that the temple in Ezekiel is actually the Vatican. But this is Ezekiel 8, and he said to me, Son of man, please lift up your eyes toward the north. And I lifted my eyes northward, and north of the slaughter place gate, I saw this image of jealousy in the entrance. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing, the great abominations which the house of Israel are doing there? Driving me away from my set-apart place, and you are to see still greater abominations. But I just wanted you to be aware of this because he mentions to the north. And what is north of Israel? Europe and Italy. He was talking about the Vatican. You'll have to watch that video. I'll have it out real soon because I've already got the slides done for it. But it's really, all this ties together. We've just been blinded, and it's time we open our eyes and really look at what happened. Continuing on in this foreshadow in Deuteronomy 32, I will pile disasters on them. I will use up my arrows against them. They will be weak from hunger, ravaged by pestilence and bitter plague. I will unleash on them wild beasts and fangs, as well as venomous snakes that slither in the dust. Outside the sword will take their children, and inside there will be terror. The young man and the old woman will be killed, the infant and the gray-haired man. I would have said I will cut them to pieces and blot out the memory of them from mankind, if I had not feared insult from the enemy, or feared those foes might misunderstand and say, our own hand has prevailed. It wasn't Yahuwah who did all this. Israel is a nation lacking sense and no understanding at all. If only they were wise, they would figure it out. They would understand their fate. How could one man pursue 1,000, or two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them? unless Yahuwah had given them up. But their rock is not like our rock. Even our enemies concede. For their vine is the vine of Sodom, and from the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are poisonous, their clusters are bitter, their wine is serpent's venom, and deadly poison of cobras. This is a direct prophetic thing. He's talking about the two rocks. He's talking about the rock of salvation from Yahuwah of hosts versus the rock that Peter and them built in Rome. Here I'm going to show you something that's hidden that you may have not seen. When you look at Matthew 27:59 through 61, and it says, and Joseph took the body, hosoma in Greek, and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud, and laid it in its own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. Then he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb, and went away. This is very prophetic, because this is essentially what happened to us. It's like Yeshua took the body and wrapped it into a new form or new religion, and laid it in a tomb by Peter, the rock he cut out, and then he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb, and he went away. And we're in the wrath, and people don't even see it because it's been hidden. And it was hidden from us on purpose. Our eyes were blinded and our ears were closed, so we didn't see it. And he gives us another clue to this in Matthew 16:18. And he said, and I say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. So he's telling you that this is where it's going to be built at. He even gives us the location and who he builds it with. Now, and then in Luke 17:34, here comes the kicker. It's like, and the disciples said to him in response, where, Master? And he said to them, where the corpse is, there the vultures will be gathered. And the corpse is the same as the body in Matthew 27. Now that's a translation thing, one reason we missed it. But then we get another clue about Paul being included of it, because he uses the same word for the body of the church. So is it a body or is it a corpse that he was building? It's the raft. It's a corpse. And it was done because people are not following his laws. And it all fits together. It's very complex, but it all fits together. I hope I'm saying this where y'all see this. I mean, it's like a terror, like Isaiah says, it's a terror to understand this. But I totally understand it now, and it scares me for everybody out there that's in what is called the body of Christ. Christ was a made-up thing. Yeshua was real, very real, and he did come and he did die, and he did rise from the dead. But they went off to Rome and built something totally different. And everybody's caught up in it. So I hope y'all understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that who you've been praying to is false. What I'm saying is the construct of the religion that they built around him was false. I hope that makes sense. Now, continuing on with Isaiah, and this is in Isaiah 65, it gives us some more clues. Verse 3, a people who provoke me to my face continually, sacrificing in the gardens and making offerings on bricks, who sit in tombs and spend the night in secret places, who eat pig's flesh and broth of tainted meat in their vessels, who say, keep to yourself, do not come near me, for I am too holy for you. These are the smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all the day. Now, that's going into future prophecy. And that right there tells you, though, immediately, who eat pig's flesh? How many followers and Christians do you know that eat pork? All of them. Almost everybody eats pork. And he's telling you, these are a smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all the day. That's scary. Now, we go back to Isaiah 22, which is our primary focus here, verse 15. Thus says the Master, Yahuwah of hosts, Go, come to this steward, to Sheba, who is over the house, and say, What have you here? Whom have you here, that you have hewn a burial site here? He who hews himself a burial site on high, inscribing a resting place for himself in a rock. So, who inscribed themselves a resting place in a rock? It was Paul. He used Peter. Peter stretched out that hand and went where he shouldn't have gone and let somebody else dress him. Jeremiah 51:6. Flee out of the midst of Babylon and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in their iniquity, for this is the time of Yahuwah's vengeance, and he will render unto her a recompense. This is the same warning we have in Revelation. The same one. Come out of her, my people, so you don't share in all this. He's telling you to come out of all this. You got to change. You have to get away from these churches, all of them. They're all messed up. They're all involved in the wrath. Now I'm going to show you how I know this was Peter. Isaiah 22:17. See, Yahuwah is hurling you away, old man, and is firmly grasping you, rolling you up tightly like a ball into a wide land. There you are to die, and there your esteemed chariots are to be the shame of the master's house. And I shall drive you from your office, and you shall be ousted from your position. It's the same thing he said in John 21:18 through 19. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and you walked where you wished. But when you are old, you'll stretch out your hands, and another shall gird you and bring you to where you do not wish. Now this he said, signifying by what death he would esteem Elohim. And having said this, he said to him, Follow me. It's like he was trying to warn him, don't do this, follow me. And let's think about the statement. Now he said this signifying by what death he would esteem Elohim. He messed up. And that's exactly what Yeshua was trying to warn him about. He even warned him like, Satan wants to sift you. He said all kinds of things. I mean, Peter denied him 3 times. He denied him with oaths and curses. And, Yeshua said, if you deny me before man, I'll deny you before the Father. So, there's a lot of things here that we haven't ever talked about in the churches. And they're not going to talk about them because they're caught up in this wrath. Isaiah 22:20. And it shall be in that day that I shall call my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and I will put your robe on him, and strengthen him with your girdle, and give your authority into his hand. And he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to the house of Judah. And I shall place the key of the house of David on his shoulder, and he shall open he shall open, and no one shuts, and shall shut, and no one opens. And I shall fasten him like a peg in a steadfast place, and he shall become a throne of esteem to his father's house. And they shall hang on him all the weight of the father's house, the offspring, the offshoots, all the vessels, of the small quantity from the cups to all the jars. Now, let's look over here at verse 21. I shall put your robe on him and strengthen him with your girdle and give your authority into his hand. And we go back to John 21:18. Truly, truly, I tell you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk where you wanted. But when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you don't want to go. It's the same thing. This is what Isaiah is describing. And it says that the person that is placed there instead of Peter will become a father to everybody. Well, what does Paul tell us in 1 Corinthians 4:15? For though you have countless guides in Christ, you do not have many fathers, for I became your father in Christ Jesus through the gospel. And then in Philemon 1:10, I appeal to you, my child, Onesiphorus, whose father I became in my imprisonment. He was constantly saying he was everybody's father, and that's what they call the priest in the Catholic Churches, the fathers. Now, Yahushua tells us something very important in John 5:43. He said, I come in my Father's name, and ye receive me not. Though another come in his own name, him ye will receive. Well, that's exactly what everybody has done. It's like when I am on Facebook or I'm in a large group looking at the post, and it's like I see somebody start talking about Yahuwah's law and following Yahuwah's law or keeping the Sabbath or something like that. And the next thing I know, there's, 10 people going, but Paul said, and that's what happened. They don't even say, but Yahuwah says. No, they say, but Paul said. So they're actually using Paul's name. Now, what does Isaiah tell us in verse 25? In that day, declares Yahuwah of hosts, the peg that is fastened in the steadfast place shall be removed and be cut down and fall, and the burden that was on it shall be cut off, for Yahuwah has spoken. And that's what happened. It's like Peter just drops out and Paul takes over. This is exactly what Isaiah says happens. Isaiah 22. And in that day, Yahuwah Elohim of hosts called for weeping and mourning, for baldness, and wearing sackcloth, and behold, joy and gladness, killing ox and slaughtering sheep, eating flesh, and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Yahuwah of hosts has revealed himself in my ears. Surely this iniquity will not be atoned for until you die, says Yahuwah Elohim of hosts. He is telling you this has been revealed to him, that this is what this person's going to say. And that's exactly what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:32. What do I gain if, humanly speaking, I fought the beast at Ephesus? If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And it's really uncanny, scary. But Pope Francis says that same line, humanly speaking. He says, and if at times our efforts and works seem to fail and not produce fruit, we need to remember that we are followers of Jesus Christ, and his life, humanly speaking, ended in failure, the failure of the cross. Now, words are important, especially for a speaker that is speaking to, that many people. Who uses humanly speaking? We all know we're humans, and we're the only creatures that speak. So what are they? They're demons. No, they're probably fallen angels. And this is something to think about when you're reading this. It's like Daniel 8 tells us the he-goat of the king of the Greeks with the great horn which is between his eyes, he'll be the first king. And the one that was broken in the place that stood for 4 horns, and 4 kings shall rise out of the nation, but not their own strength. And in the latter time of the kingdoms, when their sins are coming in full, there shall arise a king bold in countenance, in understanding, and riddles. And his power shall be great, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and prosper in practice, and shall destroy mighty men and holy people. What did Paul do? He destroyed mighty men and holy people, because he dragged them away from Yahuwah and Yahuwah's law. And the yoke of his chain shall prosper. Well, what is the Catholic Church but a yoke of the chain that Paul created? Craft in his hand, he'll magnify himself in his heart, and by craft shall destroy many. And he shall stand up with the destruction of many, and shall crush them as eggs in his hand. And the vision of the evening and the mornings that was mentioned is true. And see, we're talking about the valley of the vision. And do thou seal the vision for many days. And I, Daniel, fell asleep and was sick, and I arose, and did the king's business. And I wondered at the vision, but there was none that understood. So Daniel saw this same thing, and it made him sick for days. And you see, Paul he tells you flat out, yet crafty fellow that I am, I caught you with trickery. And then he also tells you that he was giving people to Satan. You are to deliver this man to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, so that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. Well, Satan saves nobody. It's like Yahusha said, the only way to the Father is through him, not through Satan. So the sure peg was set. Peter set up Paul, and the sure peg was set. The line of succession started. And there you have it. Just wanted to mention a few other places where I see this. There's a bunch of places, but I'm going to show you some really solid evidence that this is correct. In Matthew 16:4, this is what Yahushua tells us. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given except the sign of Jonah. So he left them and departed. That little statement carries so much that people don't see. Let's look at Jonah 2. And Jonah prayed to Yahuwah, his Elohim, from the stomach of the fish. And he said, I called to Yahuwah because of my distress, and he answered me from the stomach of, and your scriptures will say Sheol, but like I said, it's mistranslated, it's Saul. I cried, and you heard my voice. For you threw me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your breakers and your waves passed over me. So I said, I've been driven away from your eyes. Would I ever look again toward your set-apart temple? Waters encompassed me unto life. The deep enclosed around me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the base of the mountains. The earth with its bars were behind me forever. But you brought up my life from the pit. O Yahuwah my Elohim, when my life fainted within me, I remembered Yahuwah, and my prayer went up to you, into your set-apart temple. Those observing false, worthless, forsake their own loving commitment. But I slaughter to you with the voice of thanksgiving. I pay what I have vowed. Deliverance to Yahuwah. He delivered me out of the belly of the fish. And Yahuwah spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah to dry land. What he's telling you here is the fish is the church or the assembly, the assemblies that we see today. That's like all of them. And they are worthless, forsaking Yahusha's for this false made-up system that they've made up with none of Yahuwah's laws and his Sabbaths or any of that stuff. And this is like a wrath he's setting up. You're an evil and adulterous generation. You want a sign, you're not going to get one. And what he's saying is the wrath. He's starting the wrath. Let's look at Proverbs. This ties into these two scriptures too. My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Saul, and entirely like those going down to the pit. Let us find all the precious goods. Let us fill our houses with spoils. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way of them. Keep your foot from their path. For your feet run to evil, and they hurry to shed blood. For in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. But they lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owners. So it's like here's another warning with the word Saul in there. And then it's talking about those that have one purse, like the assemblies. And do not walk in the way with them. The way they're going is wrong. Don't follow it. Keep your foot from their path. Don't get on their path. For their feet are running to evil. He's warning us all over the place. It's just that our eyes have been closed and our ears have been shut, and we don't see it. This is how badly we don't see it. Matthew 13. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. And I've skipped some verses because he goes on to explain the parable, and most of you have read the parable, so I'm going to start here at verse 36. And his disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. And he answered, the one who sows the good seeds is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds were gathered and burned with the fire, so it will be in the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of the kingdom all causes of sin, all lawbreakers, and throw them in the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who hears, let him hear. He's even reminding you of the ears and the hearing thing. But what he's saying here is all the lawbreakers are going to be thrown in a fiery furnace. But I don't know why people don't see this. It's the Paul scriptures, and people say, well, you pull that out of context. No, I didn't pull it out of context. I pulled Romans 6:14. Ye are not under the law. Google whether Christians are under the law or not and tell me who all's verses come up to tell you that they're not under the law. Every verse will be Paul. And there'll be billions of sites with it. And you have billions of followers that think they are not supposed to follow Yahuwah's law. And the reason they think that is Paul's words. And no, I'm not pulling them out of context. If Paul would have taught the same thing as Yahusha, then everybody would be following the law. There would be nobody that thinks that they can eat pork that's going to flare Yahuwah's nostrils at the end times. There wouldn't be anybody that would anger him eating pork because nobody would be eating pork. The only reason they do is because of Paul's scriptures. Isaiah 9. Here's another time when Isaiah is telling us who it is. The people did not turn to him who struck them, nor inquire of Yahuwah of hosts. So Yahuwah cut off Israel head and tail, palm branch and reed in one day. The elder and the honored man, he is the head, and the prophet who teaches the lies is the tail. For those who guide his people have been leading them astray, and those who are guided by them are swallowed up. Therefore Yahuwah does not rejoice over their young men, and has no compassion over the fatherless and widows. For every one is godless and an evildoer, and every mouth speaks folly. For all this his anger has not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still. And when you see that little line, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still, you see that in Isaiah. This is talking about this time period that I've been showing y'all. And I know it in my heart. I don't know how, but I do. I guess I do know how, because it's Yahuwah that showed me. Here's another place where we can see clearly they messed up. Zechariah 11, 7 through 14. So I pastured the flock doomed for slaughter, hence the afflicted of the flock. I took for myself two staves. The one I called favor or grace, and the other I called union. So I pastured the flock. Then I annihilated 3 shepherds in 1 month. Not one. We've been taught just Judas. No, there were 3. For my soul was impatient with them, and their soul was weary of me. And I said, I will not pasture you. What is to die, let it die. What is to be annihilated, let it be annihilated. And let those who are left eat one another's flesh. I took my staff favor and cut it in pieces, to break my covenant which I had made with all peoples. So it was broken on that day. Thus the afflicted of the flock, who were watching me, realized that this was the word of Yahuwah. I said to them, is it good in your sight? Give me my wages. If not, never mind. So they weighed out 30 shekels of silver as my wages. And then Yahuwah said to them, throw it to the potter, that magnificent price at which they valued by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and threw them to the potter in the house of Yahuwah. And I cut it in pieces, my second staff union, to break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. So, and he says again in Jeremiah 15:2, those that are for pestilence to pestilence, and those that are for the sword to the sword, those that are for famine to famine, and those that are for captivity to captivity. And the sword is not always a battle in the scriptures. The sword is the mouth of Yahusha. It's not just a sword of battle. This part speaks to what's going on too at the same time period. Jeremiah 23, 9 through 15. My heart is broken within me, and my bones tremble. I have become like a drunkard, like a man overcome with wine, because of Yahuwah, because of his holy word. For the land is full of adulterers. The land mourns because of the curse, and the grazing lands in the wilderness have dried up. Their way has become evil, and their power is not rightly used, because both the prophet and the priest are ungodly, even in my house. I have found their evil. This is Yahuwah's declaration. Therefore their way will be to them as slippery paths of gloom. They will be driven and fall down there, for I will bring disaster on them, the year of their punishment. This is Yahuwah's declaration. Among the prophets of Samaria I saw something disgusting. They prophesied by Baal, and led my people Israel astray. Among the prophets of Jerusalem also I saw a horrible thing. They commit adultery and walk in lies. They strengthen the hand of evildoers, and none turns his back on evil. They are like Sodom to me. Jerusalem's residents are like Gomorrah. Therefore this is what Yahuwah of hosts says concerning the prophets. I'm about to feed them wormwood, and give them poison water to drink. For from the prophets of Jerusalem ungodliness has spread throughout the land. And this is echoed in Revelation 8:10. The name of the star is called wormwood, and a third part of the waters become wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. Well, waters is the word. It's like Paul, even in historical context from the Dead Sea Scrolls, is called the spouter of lies, like a water spouter. Water's always tied to the word. And what does this fit? Well, Romans 4:5. But to him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. And then Peter echoes the same thing. But we believe we would be saved through grace of the Lord Jesus, just as they will. They echoed each other as they went off to Rome and formed this new thing. Not one time does Yahusha mention grace in his red letter text of your scriptures. It's like that is totally Paul's message. When Yahusha was talking about salvation, he talked about repentance, baptism, and being born again, and then obeying. He said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Not one jot nor tittle will go from the law until all be fulfilled, and heaven and earth pass away. Well, heaven and earth hadn't passed away yet. And, it just doesn't fit. All the lawbreakers being thrown in the fiery furnace. So, if you're saved by grace, then why are the lawbreakers being thrown in a fiery furnace? People gotta think. We've been in some kind of a world that's unreal with our scriptures and not really looking at what's there. And the words of Paul have been taken over the words of Yahusha. Here's another example, Jeremiah 23:25-29. I have heard what the prophets who prophesy a lie in my name have said. I had a dream. How long will this continue in the minds of the prophets prophesying lies? Prophets of the deceit of their own mind. Through their dreams that they tell one another, they plan to cause my people to forget my name, as their fathers forgot my name, through Baal worship. The prophet who has only a dream should recount that dream, but the one who has my word should speak my word truthfully. For what is straw compared to grain? This is Yahuwah's declaration. Is not my word like fire? This is Yahuwah's declaration. Like a hammer that pulverizes rock. He's giving you that rock thing again to let you know. And it's like he said, the prophet, the one who has my word should speak my word truthfully. Well, who had his word? Peter did. Peter had his word directly from him, and he had the knowledge of the scriptures imparted into their minds. I'd love to have that. That would be awesome. But where do we see that this is what he's talking about here about the dreams is true? Well, let's look at Acts 10:15. And a voice came to him for a second time, the things which Elohim made clean, don't you be making defiled. And verse 28, but Elohim has shown me that I should not call any man impure or unclean. And then we see they were going off to the Gentiles, but in Matthew 10:5 he said, these 12 Yahusha sent out, instructed them, go nowhere among the Gentiles, and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And that word Gentiles should actually be heathens, and it actually means anybody that's not following the law of Yahuwah. But he was sending them specifically to the house of Israel. And they were deciding from a vision or dreams that these things should be changed. That what he had told them And I don't think that the Son would specifically come and spend that time teaching 12 people something and then all of a sudden change his mind over a vision. Because he even said, if they say they've seen me, don't believe them. We see in Acts where the apostles were, this was Peter speaking, in Acts 15:10 through 11. Now therefore, why are you putting Elohim to the test by placing a yoke on the neck of the disciples that neither our fathers nor we have been able to bear? But we believe we will be saved through the grace of Master Yahushua, just as they will. And then in Acts 15:28, for it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to put not one greater burden on you than these necessary things. So when you look at Jeremiah and compare it to what is said there in Acts, and another thing to note before we get to Jeremiah is that Yahushua never said anything about grace. He gave a salvation plan that entailed like repentance, baptism, being born again, and obeying. He didn't go into all this grace stuff. I don't even think he used grace not once in all his talking. So let's look at what Jeremiah says, and I think this is a direct prophecy of the apostles, and I'll tell you why. Now, when these people or a prophet or a priest ask you, what is the burden of the Lord? You will respond to them, what is the burden? I will throw you away. This is Yahuwah's declaration. As for the prophet, priest, or people who say the burden of Yahuwah, I will punish that man and his household. This is what each man is to say to his friend and to his brother. What has Yahuwah answered? Or what has Yahuwah spoken? But no longer refer to the burden of Yahuwah, for each man's word becomes his burden, and you pervert the words of the living Elohim, Yahuwah of hosts, our Elohim. You must say to the prophet, what has Yahuwah answered you? What has Yahuwah spoken? But if you say the burden of Yahuwah, then this is what Yahuwah says. Because you have said the burden of Yahuwah, I specifically told you not to say the burden of Yahuwah. I will surely forget you and throw you away from my presence, both you and the city that I gave you, and your fathers. I will bring on you everlasting shame and humiliation that will never be forgotten. Well, when it says I specifically told you not to say, this is him telling you, this is somebody he spoke to. So I think this is speaking of the apostles. Jeremiah goes on to say, therefore take note, I am against the prophets, Yahuwah's declaration, who steal my words from each other. I am against the prophets, Yahuwah's declaration, who use their own tongues to make a declaration. I am against those who prophesy false dreams, Yahuwah's declaration, telling them and leading my people astray with their falsehood and their boasting. It was not I who sent or commanded them, and they are of no benefit at all to these people. This is Yahuwah's declaration. Well, we see in Acts 16, 9 and 10, they say, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing there urging him, saying, come over to Macedonia and help us. And when he saw the vision, immediately we sought to go forth to Macedonia, concluding that Elohim had called us to announce the good news to them. Well, it's like he told us, he said that if they say they have seen me or had a vision, don't believe them. And then we have the prophets telling us the same thing. They're making a declaration themselves without me. And I believe that's what happened. Again, we look in Revelation. Come out of her, my people, so that you do not take part in her sins, and so that you do not share in her plagues. That's just part of it, but I mean, it's like, why is he telling us this? Come out of her. Her is usually the assembly or the church. It's because it is the wrath, and we need to come out of it. The truth of scriptures may make you cry, but the lie that's been taught will cost you an eternity. I fully believe that we are in the final time, and that this happened, and it's a judgment, it's a curse from Yahuwah. And just because there's a lie, it doesn't become the truth, and wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by the majority of people. Rick Warren, I don't even know who Rick Warren is, but I saw that online, and it made me think of this video. But it's like, it's very important that we see this message. Nothing is more important right now, because if you are following Paul and his doctrines, you're going to perish. We have to follow Yahushua's words in the words that are in the scriptures. He told us, he said, man will live by every word out of Elohim's mouth. Well, that's what we've got to do. And Paul's words are not from Elohim. This is advice from Jeremiah. Something to really think about. Thus says Yahuwah, stand by the roads and look. Ask for the ancient path where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Because if I try to talk to anybody out in the real world, I've done it several times, I get, oh, you need to find a brick and mortar church, and you need to quit trying to figure out the scriptures yourself and let a pastor tell you what to do. And I'm like, say what? It's like, he gave us the Holy Spirit for a reason. And we have so much knowledge that people would give anything a long time ago to be able to see. I mean, I can go to Bible Gateway and I can put in the word shell and see where all it comes up. I can put in the word wrath and see where it comes up. And get all the scriptures in the Bible in one fell swoop in just a matter of seconds that tell me everything about that specific topic. And then I can go read those chapters and try to figure out what's going on. And when you pray about it and you ask him for wisdom and you ask him to reveal the scriptures to you and show you so that you can produce the fruit that he wants you to produce, then he's going to show you those scriptures. He's going to show you how to walk and what he wants you to do. I made major changes in my life. When I figured all this out, it was like, oh my gosh. I wasn't keeping Sabbaths, I wasn't keeping feast. I started doing all those things, and it's like the scripture came alive more and more and more. It's like, you take a baby step, he'll give you a leap. I mean, I'm not kidding you. People wonder why we're not seeing the miracles. We're not seeing stuff happen. And some people say, yeah, we are. Well, we do. We see some, but not like they did when he was first here. And it's like, it's the lack of obedience. When we obey, then we'll be rewarded. It's like the rewards and the curses in Deuteronomy. It's a two-way street. It's kind of like, okay, if you have a friend and you never pick up the phone, you never talk to them, do they want to talk to you? No. Yahuwah's the same way. It's like we have to reach out and do what he wants, and he rewards you. He's a father. Do you reward your kid when they're good? Yeah. Same thing. So really take all this to heart and look at it If you disagree with me, at least research it and give it some thought and see what you think about it, because that's what I did, and I made up my mind. I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and I believe it. But you have to find that for yourself. I know for many of y'all this was a difficult lesson to go through, and you may disagree with me, but like I said, study it out yourself. Um, the facts are there. What happened was told in the prophets, and then it actually played out in the New Testament. We don't have two separate books, one for today, the New Testament, and one for yesterday, the Old Testament. We have one book, and it all fits. Um, this is all difficult for me to see, and Isaiah said it's a terror, and it is a terror to see it because I'm so worried about everybody. I hope this has blessed you, and I hope you see it. May Elohim bless you and keep you, and may Elohim make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Elohim lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. Shalom, everybody.